Well, good morning, Grace. I am really excited that you guys are all here. And today we're going to continue on in our series called The Lost and the Found. We've been working through all the parables in Luke 15. Today we will focus on the prodigal son. But before we get there, I want to start off by asking you a question. Have you ever strayed away from your family, from your life, from your beliefs, from God? And then at some point, maybe you wanted to come back because you realized that you were lost, but you were full of shame or felt as if you didn't deserve to come back, so you didn't even try. I have a bit of a story to tell about a man who would have answered yes to these questions. And then we will get to dive into another one of Jesus' parables about the lost. So there was a man, I knew him a few years ago, who was struggling way before he even knew that he was struggling. This man had been beat down, discouraged, and ripped apart throughout his life in so many different ways, to the point in which he barely had a lick of confidence left in himself. In fact, one of the only things that he was actually confident in was his ability to care for other people, even if it was just by listening to them. Well, after many, many years, this man, he had realized that he spent so much time focusing on other people and caring for others, but nobody ever was really returning the favor. Now, he didn't actually expect anybody to do this for him, but he was still holding on to the burdens of so many others on top of everything he was dealing with himself, and that he wasn't able to healthily release these. And at first, he thought he had everything under control and was fine with what he had, and he just went about his life. But he did so while holding on to several traumas from his past that nobody else in his life had even known about. There wasn't anybody there to ask him or to listen, but this man also never made it known that he needed somebody. I mean, he didn't even really know that about himself. Eventually, this led to the man feeling kind of sad, depressed, angry, alone, even though he had a family who loved him very much. Now, after more time had passed, he just felt angry about everything, and eventually he stopped feeling it all. This led to isolation, escaping through work, pushing everyone away, even sabotaging everything good in his life because he didn't deserve what he had anyways. Pushing God away because he wasn't worthy of God's time and energy. He was completely broken, completely lost. A sinful man who began to doubt God's love and his purpose for his life. However, God didn't stop chasing after this man. He, of course, had used several people as vessels to bring this man back and show him that no matter what, he still loves him. He gave him the strength to open up about the past traumas and the burdens that the man tried to carry all on his own, and then he showed him how to do it and who to share it with. This man then realized that he had taken the wrong road for a while, but that he was still invited back on the path that God had originally intended for him. So he had taken that invitation, and he dove back into building a relationship with God unlike he had ever done before. And he accepted the fact that he may have to work really hard to gain back any piece of his former life, or just completely rebuild it since he had lost everything that even mattered to him. But this man, he was given so much grace, so much mercy, to a level that he just couldn't comprehend. Because everything he had lost, well, it had been restored to him almost immediately. It's something that just didn't seem to make sense. Something he will be forever grateful for and most certainly will never forget. This man was me. Now in John 8:11, James referenced this verse last week. It says, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." The context of this verse was that the Pharisees brought a woman who was caught in sin, caught in adultery, to Jesus, and he was hoping that Jesus would give them permission for her to be stoned to death. as that was the punishment that was written in the law of Moses. Now, this is significant because as a sinner myself, at my lowest of lows, that's the punishment that I felt I deserved as well. Punishment that I expected even. Maybe not to be stoned to death exactly, but I felt as if I should have been considered dead to him. But instead, God was saying something like, look, you lost your way. You made mistakes that you're not proud of, but I don't condemn you. I forgive you. So turn away from these sins and just live a new life. You were lost, but I'm telling you now that you are found. And I'm right here. Follow me. So that's all part of my story. I strayed. God searched for me. I opened myself up to being found by him, and then he celebrated my return. He could have scolded me or punished me or for trying to push him out of my life, but he didn't. He could have left me alone and put his time and energy into someone else more deserving or more righteous, but God never left me. Do you have a moment or a season of your life that's like this too? Maybe you're in it right now. Maybe you have a loved one or just know someone else who is lost, and that's weighing heavy on your heart. Once again, just like James has been talking about these last couple of weeks, Jesus came to save the lost. He came to save you. He came to save me. He came so that all of the lost would be found, so that we would all have the same opportunity to spend eternity with him. So the Pharisees, and honestly, many of us today, we seem to struggle with this idea that Jesus came to bring the lowly, the broken, the sinful, and the truly lost people back to him. He didn't come just to welcome and take home the ones that were already living righteously or that lived generally sinless. And this had become so hard for the Pharisees to grasp. They had this idea that the Messiah was a mighty king that would be on their side since they followed the laws, while others fell short by diving into lives of prostitution or drunkenness or adultery or other sin. So in these parables, Jesus has been trying to explain to them who he is there for. He's explaining how God views the lost, which is so important because later he ends up passing on his mission to us all, to find the lost. So 2 weeks ago, we looked at the parable of the lost sheep, where Jesus helped us to begin to understand how God feels about us, about each of us, by explaining that if a man had 100 sheep and one went astray, he would leave the 99 sheep that stayed and wouldn't stop searching until he found the one that strayed away. And then last week, we looked at the parable of the lost coin, which was a similar story, and it's meant for us to see how God values each of us, and that he values us in a completely different way than someone else might, and gives us a worth that we can't even give ourselves. So Jesus is making it so clear with each of these parables that we have looked at, along with the one that we're going to look at today, that God passionately celebrates the lost being found. So will you stand with me as we read the parable of the prodigal son in Luke 15? And he said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had, and he took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And that when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but here I perish with hunger. I will arise, I will go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. So treat me as just one of your hired servants. And so he arose and he came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, and he felt compassion, and he ran and embraced him, and he kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this, my son was dead, and he is alive again. He was lost, and now he's found. And they began to celebrate. You may be seated. So this story, it is truly one of my favorite stories in all of the Bible. Diving into this parable played such a big role in me coming back to God and realizing my worth in his eyes as opposed to setting my worth in the eyes of other people. It's such a clear picture of God's true unconditional love, though, isn't it? And let's talk about this for a minute in case you don't see what I see here. Because this starts off with the younger of the sons going to his dad and asking for his share of his inheritance right now. Actually, that's not even quite right. He doesn't ask, does he? He demands it. Pretty typical coming from the youngest sibling, right? So not only did the son act pretty disrespectfully in that matter by demanding his inheritance early, it's actually much deeper and much more hurtful than that. Him asking for his inheritance now is like him saying to his father, You are dead to me. And then saying, Give me what belongs to me so I can get out of here and never see you again. Can you imagine how you would feel if one of your kids said that to you? If your baby said that to you? And I don't really mean your emotional teenager who doesn't even know what they're saying and might be just reacting poorly to feelings they don't even understand. Now, Jesus doesn't mention the age of the sons here, but it's actually likely that the sons in this parable were much older, like 30s, 40s, maybe even 60s. And it's someone who is clearly saying, Pops, your money, your property, your assets, these are worth way more to me than your life. So give me what's mine so I can be gone and live my own life. Ouch. Like that hurts. That stings. But guys, we make decisions way more often than we would like to admit that are basically like us saying these same things to God, our Heavenly Father. But I can only imagine what events or actions would have led the son to do what he did to his father. Like what struggles or demons he must have been battling. Because what he did, this would have been generally considered to be something that is absolutely unforgivable. There wouldn't really be a way to come back from it. That's how bad the situation is at this point. Like, have you ever done something like this that you might have considered unforgivable yourselves? Or has anyone ever done that to you? I want you to really think about those things while we continue on in the story. So as I said, I can only imagine the struggles or the demons that this son was dealing with. I mean, what do you think you would do if you were given an inheritance of any substance? Because usually I would think that one would want to honor the one they lost and spend it on something meaningful, or to save it for something special, or to give it to a cause that matters to you or to the one that it came from, or maybe even invest it and let it grow into something more. But that is not at all what this guy does with it. He throws it all away in reckless living, which can mean things like parties, wine, women, most likely gambling with the Gentiles. Well, this is even more significant. Like, he was really struggling. He really lost his way. Not only did he already basically tell his father, like the one who cared for him his entire life, that his money and his possessions were worth more to him than his father's life was, but then he goes out and basically says or shows that the money and the possessions, those were worthless too. So the money and the possessions, they became nothing. Meaning he believed that his father was worth less than nothing. So for his son to have reacted in this way, to treat his father the way that he did, I imagine he had to feel very sad, alone, depressed, maybe even angry. Kind of like I was in my story. Kind of like a lot of people who have ended up lost. And this is all important in Jesus' telling of this story, as he's really trying to paint the image that will hopefully correct the people's perception of who he is really extending an invitation into the kingdom of heaven to. It is not just for the righteous, but it's for the lost that they have that opportunity too. Now remember, as James has been setting up these last couple weeks, there is a pattern to these parables, as Jesus is really trying to drive this home for all to understand his purpose. And the first part of that pattern is that something is lost. In all of these parables, they start with something being lost. First, there was the sheep who had wandered away, not knowing where it was going. And then you had the coin that was mishandled and lost by a woman. And now we have a son who has lost himself, and he chose to leave everything that ever mattered to him. But you also have a father who has lost his son. The second part of this pattern is that there is something that is sought after. The shepherd had left the 99 to search for the one sheep that had wandered, and he wasn't going to give up. The woman dropped everything going on in her life and put all of her focus into seeking after the coin that she had misplaced. In this parable, the father might not have actually left his home to search for his son. But if I were to put myself in his shoes, I imagine he prayed diligently for his son's return, which is why he would have been able to see his son when he was so far off when he did return. But otherwise, it was the son that was doing the seeking. Yes, he left and he went his own way, but he did so because he was seeking for something that he felt was missing. Whether that be love or satisfaction or joy or abundance or fulfillment, he was just searching in all of the wrong places and in all of the wrong ways. Now, the third part to this pattern is that something is found. In that first parable, the shepherd found his sheep and he carried it back on his shoulders. In the next, the woman cleaned her house until she found her coin. In this story, well, we haven't really gotten to the point in which the son was found, because at this point, he hasn't done being lost yet. The son squandered everything away in reckless living. But he felt like he somehow still had things under control, right? Even though a famine had come across the land he had gone to. So he went, took things under his own hands, and got a job serving in the fields, feeding pigs. Which you have to realize would be one of the most disgusting things, or the most defiling things for a Jewish man to do. Pigs were considered to be unclean animals to them. So as he's feeding these pigs, that's when it hit him. He had hit what we would call rock bottom. So this picture here is likely what the pods looked like that he was feeding the pigs. But due to the famine and whatever was causing that, they probably looked more like this next picture. I don't know about you, but those don't look appetizing to me. These pods actually were categorized as food for the poorest of poor people. He looked at this and he realized how much he longed to be able to eat them himself. Could you imagine being there, looking at those pods and wanting to eat them yourself because you're that hungry? When I read this, I actually begin to imagine olives, because I think those are my carob pods. I believe that olives are probably the worst food ever created. So if a famine had come over the land and I didn't have anything left but olives to eat, I guess I'd probably be longing for them too. Like anything to satisfy my hunger, right? But he wasn't even given those pods to eat. He couldn't afford them. He knew that his rock bottom had already arrived. So he then basically said, man, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough food, yet I'm over here dying of hunger. And since he realized he's at his rock bottom and things simply can't be worse than they already are, he decided to give up control. He decided he was going to go back home. Like, what's the worst that can happen? It clearly could not be worse than my current circumstance, right? So he really tried to prepare himself to say something along the lines of, Dad, I messed up. I know that I told you that you are dead to me, and I lost everything you had given me to the Gentiles, but can I come back home? Not even as your son. I know I ruined that relationship, but I'll come be one of your hired servants, as I know that you'll take care of me better than I'm being taken care of now. Like, he's really working himself up here because he knows how hard it's going to be to convince his dad to let him come back in any capacity after he had done something so incredibly unforgivable and humiliating to him the last time they'd spoken. He was probably terrified. But he also knew that he had to try and pay back what his father had given him, which is a little hard to do when you have absolutely nothing left to your name, which is why he was going to offer to come back as a hired servant, to earn wages and pay back his father what belonged to him. So the son makes a decision to turn back and to come home, and then the father, seeing his son a long way off, immediately feels compassion. Before his son was even near him, before his son tried to explain or ask for forgiveness, before his son did anything to try and earn his father's grace or love or trust, he was found. And because of that, all else was almost immediately forgotten. How could that be so? How could he just see past the pain? And how can he just let his son come back after what he did without any extra effort from his son to restore their relationship or earn his love? But guys, that's what Jesus is trying to tell us here in this parable. He is trying to explain what God's love for us is really like. God's love for us does not depend on our faithfulness to him. Let me say that again. God's love for us does not depend on our faithfulness to him. So just because we stray away or make mistakes or even intentionally do bad things, well, these things don't cause God to stop loving us or to stop caring for us or stop him from seeking after us. You know, Tim says this from time to time. He says, there is nothing you can do to make God love you less. But there's also nothing you can do to make God love you more. And that is because his love for us is 100% completely unconditional. Now, I don't want to hear you say things like, Tyler, you don't know what I've done or who I am. There's no way God could still love me. And if you just got to know me, you would see that too. I don't want to hear that because it's wrong. I know that God loves you because his love for us is without condition, meaning I don't need to know you in order to know what God thinks of you or how he feels about you. I just need to know God to know those things. But back to the prodigal son returning. When the father saw him in the distance and felt that compassion and love, what's the next thing that he did? He runs. In fact, the word that Luke uses in this is to describe the father's run is actually more like the word sprint, running so hard that he is out of breath. And you have to imagine for a second what that might look like. Like the father would have had to pick up his robe, exposing his bare legs, and run as fast as he possibly can to his son. This would have looked absolutely humiliating for the father. He took on the humiliation that really belonged to the son so that the son didn't have to. And then he made sure that to get to his son as fast as he possibly could, so he would be the first one to welcome him and show him how loved he really is. Because if he didn't get there when he did, the community would have gotten to him first and would have given him the exact opposite message, letting him know that he was dead to them and cut off from their community. There's an actual term for this kind of ceremony in a Jewish community, and it's called the kezazah. The kezazah. This ceremony, it's enacted in situations exactly like this. The people in the village would have met him at the gates of the town and would have shattered a piece of pottery at the person's feet, letting him know that they were no longer in relations with that person. They were no longer in community, physically breaking the relations. It was a way of also causing shame to the returning person and of making them feel as if they were completely empty. But this father, he ran so hard to meet his son before the community even had a chance to perform the ceremony, before they had a chance to reject him, because the son was found. Now, just like in the previous two parables, what happened after the lost was found here? What happened when the son returned to his home and after the father ran to him? Well, something was celebrated. So when the sheep was carried back home, or when the coin was found, there was celebration that took place with friends and family and even with the community. In this instance, the father celebrated his son immediately by hugging him, by kissing him, even though he probably reeked of pig and manure. And then by having his servants hurry and go get the best robe and the ring and the shoes and to bring the fattened calf for them to eat, letting everyone around them know how special and how meaningful this moment is to him, but also letting all see that this man should be celebrated and not rejected. The father is saying to his son something like, "You will not ever be one of my hired servants. You will always be my son, no matter what. I will always love you. You don't have to work to earn that love for me. You were lost and you made mistakes. Sure, but now you are found again. Essentially, you were dead, but now you are alive and you are home, so let the celebrations begin." Just like the shepherd's search for the lost sheep, or the woman's search for the lost coin, or the father prayed for his lost son, God is a father searching for his lost children. He wants this story to be your story. He wants you to come back to him so that you can be celebrated when you are found again. But it's also much more than that. Think about how many people you might have in your lives that are lost to you and to God. This story of being lost and celebrated, God wants it to be their story too. I don't know about you, but it sure took me quite some time to learn that this was my story. That God feels the way that he does about me, despite the shame that I would have brought to him, despite the mistakes that I have made, despite the fact that I pushed him away and everyone else away and followed my own path. This parable, though, is really a picture of God the Father's love for you. God's love is looking for you. No matter how lost you feel, God's searching love can find you, no matter how many times you might have fallen into sin. God's hands of mercy are reaching out to pick you up and to love you and to forgive you. When I began to learn and understand this, everything shifted. My life changed. I began to feel something that I hadn't ever fully experienced before, at least not in this way. And I just want you and your loved ones to experience that too. It truly doesn't matter who you are or what you've done, or even that you're still doing it. God is searching for you. You just have to open your eyes to see it. And as long as you turn back and you seek him, he is going to run to you. No, he's going to sprint to you with open arms, and he will embrace you, and he will kiss you, and he will absolutely celebrate you. So how many of you, or the ones that you love, still need to hear and learn that this story applies to them as well? Friends, we have an opportunity to show them, to tell them. We have those invite cards out in the lobby. I challenge you to grab one and invite the people you love and care about so that they can learn more about their story, so they can learn that they are cared for, so they can experience God's unconditional love for them too. We're about to move back into a time of worship. And as we do, as you listen to or sing along with the song, I really want you to think about those that you love, those in your life that you know don't have a relationship with Jesus, those that it would absolutely break your heart not to see them in heaven with you when you get there. Will you pray with me? God, I love you so much. So grateful for you and for this day and for everybody that's in this room hearing your word. I pray that you will open our eyes to see your love for us, God, this unconditional love that we can never fully understand. I pray that you will continue to show us that love so that way we continue to turn back and just run to you, God. But so thankful that you will always run to us no matter what. I pray that you will work in the lives of all of our loved ones that still need to have a relationship with Jesus, because, God, we don't want heaven to be empty when we get there. We love you so much. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.